On her 45th birthday, my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "The best gift you could ever give me is to just die." That sentence didn't just break me, it rebuilt me. It was early morning when I stepped out of the cab, carefully balancing the cake box in my hands. The sun had barely risen, a golden glow spilling across the neat suburban lawns. Rebecca's street looked like a picture from a magazine. Perfect hedges, shiny cars, houses that whispered comfort and money. Her house stood taller than the rest, a house I had paid for. $50,000 pulled from my life savings so that my daughter and her husband could start married life without debt. I remembered signing the check, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from joy. Anything for my daughter, I thought back then. Always anything for Rebecca. That morning, I held her favorite cake, chocolate layered with strawberries, from the bakery she adored since she was a little girl. $200, a ridiculous price, some might say, but for my only child, no price was too high. I walked up the steps with my heart fluttering. I pictured her face lighting up, the way it had when she was 10 and I surprised her with a pink bicycle. I imagined her hugging me, whispering, "Thank you, Mom. You always remember." I rang the bell, my smile wide. The door opened, and the world shifted. Rebecca stood there. Her eyes didn't sparkle. Her lips didn't curve. Instead, she looked at me like I was the delivery person who had brought a package late. "Oh, it's you," she muttered flatly. Her words cut deeper than she knew. "It's you?" I had raised her, fed her, sat by her hospital bed when she had pneumonia at 3, worked triple shifts for the antibiotics. And now, on her 45th birthday, I was just me, an intrusion. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said softly, holding out the cake. "I brought your favorite, chocolate with strawberries, just like when you were little." She sighed, loudly, annoyed. Then she stepped aside, motioning for me to come in, as if she was granting me a favor. Inside, the house was spotless, decorated with expensive taste. A house filled with things money could buy. Many of those things, in fact, had been bought with my money. Rebecca sat, arms crossed. I placed the cake on the coffee table, waiting for gratitude, waiting for a smile, waiting for something. Instead, she said, "Mom, we need to talk." My heart skipped. Perhaps she had good news, a promotion, maybe, or a surprise planned. "Of course, darling. Tell me what you want. A trip, jewelry, that new car you liked. I'll make it happen." She looked me in the eye, and I saw it. Not indifference, not fatigue, not even resentment. Contempt. "The one thing I'd love most," she said slowly, like savoring each cruel syllable, "is for you to just die." If your own child said that to you, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone. The room spun. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What?" I whispered. You heard me." She leaned back casually as though discussing the weather. "I'm tired of your calls, your surprise visits, your constant presence. My life would be easier if you disappeared." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 72 years of life, 45 years of motherhood, and never once had I imagined hearing those words. I clutched the cake as if sugar and strawberries could anchor me. My voice shook. "Rebecca, I'm your mother. I've given you everything. I've sacrificed everything." "Exactly," she snapped, standing now, pacing. "That's why I can't breathe. You've smothered me. You've made me your whole life, and I can't live like that anymore. I need freedom." Tears blurred my vision. "But sweetheart, I'm all you have. I just want to be close to you." And that's the problem, the fact that I'm all you have. Get a life of your own, Mom. Leave me alone. The candles on the cake sagged. Wax dripped on the frosting. I rose slowly, my legs trembling. My voice cracked. "Happy birthday, Rebecca." She didn't reply. She didn't hug me. She didn't even look up. I walked out, the cake box heavy in my arms, my chest heavier still. The front door clicked shut behind me. On her birthday, I became a ghost. I sat in my car, clutching the steering wheel. Her words echoed. "The best gift is if you just die." Tell me, what would you have done? Would you argue? Would you slap her? Would you collapse? Or would you, like me, sit in silence, wondering if the child you raised truly loved you? That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I pulled out shoe boxes filled with receipts, notes, memories of sacrifices past. And as I sorted through decades of proof, a terrible truth emerged. I had spent nearly $500,000 on my daughter's happiness, and in return, her greatest wish was for me to vanish. But I wasn't ready to vanish. Not yet. Because when someone asks you to die, maybe what they really mean is that the version of you that sacrifices everything must die. And so I began to count, not just the money, but the years, the sacrifices, the pieces of myself I had given away. What I discovered that night changed everything. Tomorrow, I'll show you the ledger of love and how much one mother's devotion can cost when it's never repaid. I didn't cry right away. I counted. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the cake untouched, the candles melted into useless puddles of wax. My hands trembled as I reached for the old shoe boxes stacked in the corner of my closet. Inside those boxes wasn't just paper. It was a mother's proof. Receipts, bank slips, contracts, a life's worth of sacrifices folded into faded envelopes. I laid them out one by one across the table. And for the first time in 45 years, I forced myself to face the truth. How much it had cost me to be Rebecca's mother. The first slip was smudged but familiar, a hospital bill. When Rebecca was 3 years old, pneumonia nearly stole her breath. The antibiotics weren't covered by insurance. $1,200. I sold my late mother's jewelry to pay for it. I whispered the number out loud, my pen scratching it onto a notepad. 1,200. The next stack, prom season. She wanted the pink dress with sequins. Price tag, $800. I remember working entire weekends, missing church, missing rest, to pay for it. But when she twirled in that dress, her eyes sparkling, she hugged me tight and said, "Thank you, Mom. You're the best in the world." I held the receipt in my hand, my chest tightening. How could the same girl who said that later wish me dead? Next came a thick file of tuition payments. Rebecca changed her major 3 times, and I never questioned her. Semester after semester, I wrote the checks. $42,000 in total. Money I got by taking a second mortgage on my home. I remember the late nights at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, the aching feet, the skipped meals, all so she could find herself. I wrote the number on the list, 42,000. Then came the wedding receipts, invitations, florist, catering, venue, altogether $35,000. I told myself it was worth it, that a mother's job was to give her daughter a day she'd never forget. I signed each check with a smile, even when my bank account trembled at the edge of zero. On that day, Rebecca cried tears of joy, thanking me. "Mom, you've given me the wedding of my dreams." Now she gave me the nightmare of a lifetime. Have you ever given someone everything only to feel like it was never enough? Comment yes if you've felt that sting. I'm not alone, am I? Then the house.
her dream home, the very place where she told me she wanted me dead. I had written the check for the down payment, $150,000, nearly my entire life savings, scraped together from 40 years of double shifts. I signed it happily because I believed that if my daughter had a roof over her head, she would always have space for me in her life. Instead, she used that roof to shelter her contempt. There were more, so many more. 8 months of mortgage payments when David lost his job, $16,000, braces for the twins, $4,000, birthday parties and Christmas gifts across decades, at least 10,000 more. Little things no one counts. Gas money for babysitting trips, groceries I carried into her kitchen, cash slipped into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. I wrote it all down. My pen scratched until the page looked like a battlefield of numbers. When I added it, my hand shook. $460,000, almost $500,000. If I had invested that money instead of giving it away, with compound interest, it would be worth over $600,000 today, enough for a comfortable retirement, a small house by the sea, or trips across the world. Instead, I had invested in love, and love had told me to die. I leaned back, staring at the papers spread across my table. My chest ached, my eyes burned. But then the memories played. Rebecca at 5, running into my arms after her first day of school. Rebecca at 16, crying with joy when I bought her that dress. Rebecca at 22, hugging me after graduation, whispering, "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom."
The first door I walked through had a vault behind it, and for the first time in decades, the money was mine. The morning after Rebecca's birthday, I dressed with unusual care. A navy blue dress, pressed the night before, low heels, steady enough to carry me through decisions I could no longer avoid. I looked in the mirror and whispered to my reflection, "Today, you stop being the bank. Today, you become the owner." The marble floor of the bank gleamed under my shoes as I stepped inside. People rushed past, clutching deposit slips, credit cards, checks. I had been one of them for years, always rushing, always moving money out of my account, never into it. Mr. Martinez, the branch manager, spotted me immediately. He had known me for years. His smile was warm, almost paternal. "Mrs. Johnson, what brings you here today?" I smiled back, but my voice was firmer than he had ever heard. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez. I want to close joint account number 45872891. He blinked. "Are you sure? That account has a balance of $20,000. It's mine," I interrupted gently. "Transfer it all into my personal account." For a moment, I saw surprise flicker across his face. He had always seen me as the kind of woman who sacrificed, who bailed others out. Today, I wasn't that woman. He tapped his keyboard, printed the forms, slid them across. I signed with a steady hand. With each letter of my name, I felt a weight lift. When he handed me the receipt, I folded it carefully, slipped it into my purse, and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez. That will be all." If you had $20,000 tied up with someone who wished you dead, would you leave it there? Or would you take it back? Tell me in the comments. I need to hear your answer. My next stop was the mortgage loan office. The air smelled faintly of paper and ink, a scent I had always associated with obligation. Today, it smelled like opportunity. "Mrs. Johnson," said Ms. Patel, the loan officer, glancing up from her files. "What brings you in?" "I'd like to review the mortgage I co-signed for my daughter Rebecca and her husband David." She nodded, pulling a thick folder from the cabinet. The papers landed on the desk with a weighty thud, like a judge's gavel. "As co-signer, you are responsible for payments if the primary holders cannot make them.
However, this also gives you certain rights to the property in case of repeated instability. I leaned forward. Instability? Yes. For example, I see here that you personally covered 8 months of payments last year when David was unemployed. That is significant evidence of default risk. I remembered the long nights, the beans and rice dinners, the pension withdrawals. Rebecca had thanked me at the time, tears in her eyes. You saved us, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you. And now? Die, Mom. That's the best gift. I steadied my breath. Please make me a copy of these documents. I want them for my records. As she handed me the file, Ms. Patel asked, "Is there a problem with the payments now?" I smiled, but my voice was firm. Not yet, but there will be. By late afternoon, I found myself sitting across from my attorney, Mr. Enel Adams, a man in his 70s. His gray hair framed a face both kind and sharp. He had known my late husband, had seen me through wills, pensions, and quiet grief. "Julietta," he grated warmly, "what brings you here? It's not often I see you without Rebecca." I exhaled slowly. That will never happen again, Enel. I need to change everything. My will, my insurance, my beneficiaries, everything. His eyebrows lifted, but he leaned in. "Tell me what happened." And I did. Every word. The cake, the wish, the phone call at midnight. His expression darkened with each detail, his pen scratching notes furiously. When I finished, his eyes glistened. "I'm so sorry, Julietta. After everything you've done for her..." I shook my head. "No more tears. I want action. From now on, Rebecca gets nothing. I want to leave everything to the Orphans Foundation, and I want to set up a trust fund for my grandchildren, but they can't touch it until they're 25. He nodded slowly. "That can be done. And your life insurance?" "Remove her name, change all the beneficiaries." For 2 hours, we combed through every document. My $100,000 life insurance policy, my pension, my modest investments, even my old apartment lease. With each signature, I felt myself grow lighter. If you've ever thought about what would happen to your money if you were gone tomorrow, you need to subscribe right now, because the twist that's coming, you'll want to be ready for it. When I stepped out of Annal's office, the sun had set. The city lights flickered on one by one, like candles in the dark. But I didn't feel lost anymore. For the first time in decades, my decisions were for me. Not for Rebecca, not for David, not for anyone else. As I walked home,
She asked me to disappear, so I disappeared with a plan she would never see coming. I woke the next morning with a strange clarity. The pain was still there, like a bruise that refused to fade, but beneath it pulsed something new: determination. Rebecca wanted me gone, then gone she would get. But not in a coffin, not with tears at a funeral. No, she would get my disappearance in a way that would haunt her far more than death. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I had saved months earlier but never dared to use. "Good morning, Silver Horizons Travel," answered a cheerful male voice. "This is Julietta Johnson," I said, my tone steady. "I saw your promotion about retirees living abroad, Switzerland. Can you send me the complete information?" There was a pause, then warmth in his reply. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson. Switzerland is very popular. My name is Klaus, and I'll be your advisor. Do you want details for short stays or permanent relocation?" I swallowed, surprising even myself with the firmness of my answer. "Everything. I want everything." That afternoon, I knocked on my neighbor's door. Elvira opened it, her kind eyes widening. She was 68, retired, with a voice that always carried both warmth and mischief. "Julietta," she said, ushering me inside, "you look different. What happened?" I sat at her pigeon table, the words pouring out: the cake, the cruelty, the midnight call, the shoebox of receipts, and the vow I had made. By the end, Elvira's hands covered her mouth.
My God, after all you've done for her, she said that? Yes, my voice cracked, but then I straightened. And that's why I need your help. Her eyes narrowed with a spark of solidarity. Tell me what you need. And so I told her my plan to vanish, to let Rebecca believe I had truly disappeared. The letter I would leave, the documents, the timing. Elvira would be the one to discover my empty apartment and deliver the truth. Her lips curved into a grin I hadn't seen in years. You know I was a drama teacher for 30 decades, right? If you want a performance, you'll get an Oscar-worthy one. We both laughed, an unexpected, liberating laugh. If you had a chance to fake your own disappearance just to teach someone a lesson, would you do it? Comment yes or no. Be honest. I'm curious. Back in my apartment, I opened my closet and pulled out 2 suitcases. I packed slowly, carefully, the blue dress I loved, a wool coat for European winters, my journals, and my mother's old rosary. Every item I folded was like a line drawn between the old Julietta and the new. The shoe boxes of receipts stayed behind. They weren't just paper anymore. They were evidence, proof of love, proof of sacrifice. They would speak louder than I ever could. I sat at my desk and began writing the letter. 23 pages. My pen carved into the paper, each word chosen like a scalpel cutting through decades of silence. Dear Rebecca, you asked me, as a birthday gift, to disappear from your life. I have decided to grant your wish. When you read this letter, I will be far away, beginning a life I should have lived years ago. Enclosed, you will find documents proving the changes I've made. My will now leaving everything to charity, and a trust for your children. The cancellation of the joint account you once relied on. A notice that, as your mortgage co-signer, I am exercising my rights. You wished me gone. Your life will indeed be easier without me, but it will also be much more expensive. I ended it with one line. May you finally learn the value of what you've lost. She asked me to disappear, so I disappeared, with a plan she would never see coming. The cab pulled up right on time, 6 a.m. sharp. Its headlights cut through the thin morning fog, a pale beam against the still sleeping street. The driver, a man with tired eyes and a baseball cap pulled low, stepped out and lifted my suitcases into the trunk. The sound of the trunk slamming shut echoed like a door closing on my old life. I slid into the back seat, the leather cold beneath me. The smell of coffee and faint cigarette smoke clung to the air. The driver glanced at me through the rear view mirror. Where to, ma'am? My heart thumped, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. I tightened my grip on my handbag, which held the passport I hadn't used in years, the receipt from the bank, and my 23-page letter waiting back on the kitchen table. To the airport, I said. He nodded, pulling the car into gear. Early flight? He asked casually. Yes, I answered simply. I turned my gaze to the window as the cab rolled down the street. Each familiar landmark passed by like chapters of a book I was finally closing. The bakery where I had bought Rebecca's cake, the park where I had once pushed her on the swings, the hospital where I had given 4 decades of my life as a nurse. Every corner whispered memories, some sweet, some bitter, all of them heavy. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and thought, this is the last time I will see this city as the woman I used to be. The city slowly woke around us. A jogger crossed the street, bundled against the cold. A delivery truck rattled by. Streetlights flickered and clicked off as dawn claimed the sky. The driver cleared his throat. Business or pleasure? He asked casually. I almost laughed. How could I explain? That this trip was neither business nor pleasure, but survival. That I was vanishing from the life my own daughter had condemned me in. "New beginning," I answered softly. The man gave a small nod, as if he understood more than his simple question asked. He didn't pry further. I leaned back, letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the road steady me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't rushing to Rebecca's aid. I wasn't headed to babysit, or to write another check, or to fix yet another crisis. I was headed toward myself. 40 minutes later, the airport came into view. Tall glass windows reflecting the pale gold of sunrise, planes already roaring into the sky. The driver parked at the departure curb. He stepped out, lifted my suitcases, and placed them gently beside me. "Safe travels, ma'am," he said. I handed him a tip, more than I normally would. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "You've helped me more than you know." He gave me a curious smile, but didn't ask questions. Some journeys he seemed to understand were too personal to explain. I gripped the handles of my suitcases. The automatic doors slid open, a gust of cold airport air rushing out to greet me. And as I stepped inside, ticket and passport ready, I whispered under my breath, "This is the first step of my disappearance." Some people leave with goodbyes, hugs, and promises to return. I left with silence, with 2 suitcases, and with a letter that would soon detonate my daughter's perfect little world. Because while I soared toward Switzerland, Rebecca would come home to an empty apartment, an open letter, and the crushing reality that her birthday wish had come true, just not in the way she wanted. My letter was 23 pages long, but it only needed one line. "Your life will be easier without me, but it will also be much more expensive." 2 days after I boarded the plane, Olvara played her part. She walked into my apartment with the spare keys, looked around at the neatly emptied rooms, and called Rebecca with a trembling voice. "Your mother's gone," she told her. "All I found was this letter." Rebecca drove over in a fury. Her children left confused at home. She stormed into my tiny apartment, the one she had always called cluttered and pathetic. Now it looked like a crime scene of absence. Drawers empty, closet cleared, photos missing. On the kitchen table lay the envelope, 23 pages inside. Rebecca tore it open. Her eyes scanned the first line. "You asked me, as your birthday gift, to disappear. I have decided to grant your wish." Her breath caught. She read faster, panic climbing with each word. The will, rewritten. The insurance, transferred. The trust fund for her children, untouchable until they were 25. The joint account, closed. The mortgage, documented proof I could reclaim the house. The paper trembled in her hands. "Mom?" she whispered, though the room was empty. "If you found a letter like that from your mother, what's the first thing you'd feel? Anger, guilt, fear? Drop your one-word answer in the comments." Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, I sat at a cafe by Lake Zurich. The water sparkled, the Alps stood proud in the distance. A waitress set a cup of coffee before me, the steam curling into the crisp morning air. I lifted the cup, savoring the taste. Rich, smooth, nothing like the instant coffee I gulped at home between double shifts. For the first time in decades, I didn't glance at my phone waiting for Rebecca's call. I didn't calculate how much of my pension I'd need to send her way. I simply sipped. I bought myself fresh flowers from a street vendor, a bouquet of tulips, bright, unapologetically unnecessary. Then, on a whim, I purchased a silk scarf for $100. I didn't ask if Rebecca might need that money. I asked only if I liked the color. And I did. By afternoon, my phone buzzed. The first text from Rebecca appeared. "Mom, where are you? Call me." The 5th, "Mom, this isn't funny. The kids are asking for you." The 10th, "The bank called. What's going on?" I placed the phone face down on the table. turned my gaze back to the lake, and smiled. Wouldn't you want to know what happens when the people who used you suddenly realize you're gone? Subscribe now, because the fallout only gets uglier from here. Back in my hometown, Rebecca paced her spotless kitchen, the letters spread across the counter. David walked in, his face pale. "What's this about the mortgage?" he asked, holding the copied documents. Rebecca snapped. "She's bluffing." But her voice cracked. "She's not bluffing," David whispered. "Your mom never bluffed. And you," he pointed a trembling finger, "you told her to die." Rebecca slammed her hand on the counter. "I didn't mean it." But the truth was written in black ink, my 23 pages of truth. That night, I returned to my apartment in Zurich. It was small, but cozy. The window looked out over a park where children played, their laughter carrying in the cool evening air. I opened a bottle of French wine and toasted myself. For years, I had toasted Rebecca, her birthdays, her achievements, her milestones. This time, I raised my glass to me, to Juliana, to the woman who had finally remembered she had a name of her own. For decades, I believed that sacrifice equaled love, that the more I gave, the more my daughter would treasure me. But here, in the silence of my new life, I realized the truth. Love without respect is exploitation. Have you ever confused sacrifice with love? Comment love if you've been there. By morning, the messages had multiplied. 20, 30, 40. First came the guilt. "Mom, the kids are crying. Please come back." Then the threats. "We'll call the police. You can't just vanish." Finally, the truth. "The mortgage lawyer says you can take our house. You can't do this." I set my coffee down and smiled, because that was the moment Rebecca finally realized she hadn't just lost her mother. She had lost her lifeline. She said she was worried about me, but what she really worried about was math, because love doesn't sound like a bank statement. 3 days after my letter reached Rebecca, there was a knock at my old apartment door. Of course, I wasn't there to answer it, but Alvara was. She opened it to find David standing there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His tie hung loose, his eyes rimmed with red. "Alvara," he pleaded, "please, where's Julieta? We need her." My neighbor crossed her arms. "Do you need her? Or do you need her money?" David flinched. He had no answer. Back in Switzerland, my phone vibrated constantly. "Mom, you can't do this. The kids don't understand. The bank says you're serious. Please call me." And finally, Rebecca's voice, left in a shaky voicemail. "Mom, if you take the house, where will we go? Do you really want your grandchildren homeless?" Her tone was sharp with accusation, but beneath it, I heard what she wouldn't admit. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing comfort. If someone only calls you when money is involved, is that love? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear the truth. Meanwhile, I woke up in Zurich with birdsong outside my window. The apartment Klaus had found for me was small but beautiful, overlooking a tree-lined park. I stretched, brewed coffee, and opened the window to let the cool alpine air fill the room. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel rushed. No babysitting calls, no late-night emergencies, no, "Mom, we need you now." The only schedule I had was my own. That morning, I put on my new silk scarf, the one I'd bought for no reason other than liking the color, and walked to Herr Meyer's office. Herr Meyer, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Johnson, welcome. Please sit. Let's look at your finances." I handed him my folders, bank statements, pension documents, savings records. He studied them carefully, then looked up. "With your pension and current savings, you can live comfortably here for the rest of your life. But if we invest wisely, you could do even better. In 5 years, you might double your assets." Double. The word echoed in my mind like a revelation. For decades, I had poured money into Rebecca's life, watching it vanish with no return. And now, with one decision, I could make that same money grow just by choosing myself. I leaned back, emotions flooding me. Relief, bitterness, hope. For years, I thought being a good mother meant emptying my pockets, breaking my back, starving my dreams. But here was the truth in black and white. I could have lived with dignity all along. I just had to stop confusing sacrifice with love. If you've ever given until it hurt, hoping for love in return, subscribe now, because what comes next proves just how dangerous it is to be someone's lifeline. Later that week, David showed up at Alvara's again. His desperation had sharpened into panic. "Please, Alvara," he begged, his voice cracking. "Talk to her. Convince her to come back. We're drowning." My neighbor shook her head. "David, she begged for your respect. Rebecca asked for her death instead, and now you're asking for her money. Do you even hear yourselves?" David's shoulders sagged. "We made mistakes, but she can't just vanish." "Yes," Alvara said, coldly. "She can. And she has." That night, I treated myself to dinner at a lakeside restaurant. I ordered salmon with caviar and a glass of champagne. The waiter placed the plate before me, and for a moment, I stared at it in awe. How many times had I skipped meals so I could cover Rebecca's crises? How many times had I eaten beans and rice while she dined in luxury? Not tonight. I lifted my fork, tasted the richness, and smiled. It wasn't just food. It was freedom on a plate. I know some of you are shaking your heads. How could a mother do this? But let me ask you, how could a daughter look at her mother and say, "The best gift would be if you died"? There comes a point when survival demands boundaries, and that's what this was. By the weekend, Rebecca's text grew frantic. "You're ruining our lives. The lawyer says you can take the house. If you don't answer, I'll call social services and say you're not in your right mind." That last one made me pause, because I realized my daughter wasn't just desperate. She was dangerous. And the next time my phone rang, it wasn't her voice I heard. It was a social worker.
My daughter couldn't stop me with guilt, so she tried to stop me with lies. She told the world I was losing my mind. It was a Tuesday morning in Zurich. I was sitting by the window, sipping coffee, the lake glittering in the distance. My phone rang. An international number. "Mrs. Julietta Johnson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a social worker in your hometown. We've received a complaint regarding your well-being." My chest tightened. "A complaint?" "Yes, your daughter, Rebecca Johnson, alleges that you may be suffering from dementia or cognitive decline. She says you've made financial decisions that put you at risk. She's concerned for your safety." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Dementia? Me? The woman continued gently. "We need to verify your well-being. Would you be willing to undergo a medical and psychological evaluation through the U.S. consulate here in Switzerland?" I clenched the phone. Rebecca hadn't just wished me dead. Now she wanted to bury me alive under a lie. "Yes," I said firmly. "Arrange it. I'll prove the truth." If your own child accused you of being mentally unfit just to control your money, what would you do? Fight? Forgive? Comment your answer. I need to know. The following Thursday, I walked through the glass doors of the American consulate in Zurich. Security checks, metal detectors, forms to sign. Finally, I was escorted into a white-walled office where an older American doctor greeted me. "Mrs. Johnson," he said kindly, "I'll be conducting your evaluation today. Nothing to worry about. We'll go through memory tests, problem-solving exercises, and a full interview." For 3 hours, I answered questions, solved puzzles, recited details of my life, even wrote short essays on abstract concepts. When he finally closed his folder, he looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Johnson,
Not only are you in perfect mental health, but your ability to plan, reason, and recount detail are far above average. Your daughter's allegations are unfounded. Relief flooded me. I wasn't just cleared, I was validated. That evening, I called my lawyer, Enel, back home. She accused me of dementia, I said bitterly. I know. She also tried to challenge the changes to your will and insurance. She's claiming you weren't in your right mind when you signed them. Can she win? I asked. No, Enel said firmly. We have recordings of our meetings. You were lucid, logical, and clear in every decision. Plus, the consulate's medical report will crush her claims. He paused, then added, Julieta, I think it's time we prepare a defamation suit. What she's done could damage your reputation, and it cannot go unanswered. For the first time, I felt not just sadness, but anger. Anger sharp enough to protect myself. Do it. If she wants a fight, she'll get one. This is why boundaries matter, because sometimes the people you love most will use the sharpest lies to cut you down. Subscribe now, because the next move Rebecca made, it backfired harder than she ever imagined. That night, I sat on my balcony, the mountains glowing under the moonlight. I thought about how far Rebecca was willing to go. First, she asked me to die. Then she tried to erase me legally, calling me unfit, unstable, demented. But the truth was clear. I had never been more lucid in my life. And as I sipped my wine, I whispered into the night, You cannot erase me, Rebecca. Not with words, not with lies, not ever again. Back home, Rebecca received the report from social services. Her complaint was marked unfounded. Worse, she now carried a record of filing a false allegation. David confronted her. Why you tried to claim your mother had dementia? What were you thinking? Rebecca snapped. I was thinking about the house, the money, the kids. David shook his head, exhausted. You weren't thinking about your mother, not once. For years, I had feared growing old, feared becoming weak and dependent. But as I walked through Zurich next morning, past bustling markets and laughing children, I realized something. I was 72 years old, and I had never been stronger. By the weekend, I received a call from Enel. His voice carried both triumph and surprise. Julieta, he said, the bank has made a decision about the house. I held my breath, the phone trembling in my hand. And what he told me next changed everything.
The bank called me with news my daughter never expected. The house she humiliated me in was no longer hers. It was Saturday morning when the phone rang in my Zurich apartment. Enel's voice came through, calm but edged with satisfaction. Julieta, the bank has completed their review. Because you covered 8 months of missed payments, and because David is unemployed again, they've ruled in your favor. You now have the right to reclaim the property. For a moment, silence filled the line. Then I whispered, You mean the house is mine? Yes, Enel confirmed. The foreclosure process has started. The home where your daughter told you to die will soon be in your hands again. I closed my eyes. My heart didn't race with revenge. It pulsed with justice. Back home, Rebecca was livid. She stormed around the living room, shouting at David. How could she do this? It's my house. David shook his head. No, Rebecca, it was her money. It was always her money. She grabbed the phone, dialing Enel directly. This is ridiculous. My mother is manipulating everything. Enel's reply was calm. Your mother isn't manipulating anything. She's simply exercising rights she earned by saving you from foreclosure last year. Actions have consequences, Miss Johnson. Rebecca slammed the phone down so hard the receiver cracked. Be honest. If you were Julieta, would you take the house back, or would you let your daughter keep it after what she said? Comment, take it, or leave it, below. While Rebecca raged, I was walking along Lake Zurich with tulips in hand. The air was crisp, the mountains glowing in the distance. I stopped at a cafe, ordered tea, and pulled out a notebook. For years, I had written checks. Now I was writing plans, trips I wanted to take, classes I wanted to join, maybe even a painting course. I smiled as I wrote, my pulse steady. For the first time in decades, I wasn't chasing anyone else's dream. I was chasing my own. A week later, David showed up at Elvira's door again. His face was gaunt, his voice desperate. Elvira, please, talk to Julietta. We're going to lose everything. My neighbor folded her arms. Maybe it's time you learned to stand without her. She gave you a roof, a lifeline, and you both spat in her face. David's eyes filled with tears. I know Rebecca was cruel, but the kids don't deserve this. Elvira's voice softened slightly. Then be a better father. Show them how to survive without leaning on their grandmother's back. 2 weeks later, Annelle called again. The foreclosure is complete. After expenses, you'll recover your $150,000 plus interest, about $185,000 in total. I sat at my kitchen table, tears rolling down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of vindication. $500,000 given over decades, and now at 72, I was finally getting a small piece of it back. Thank you, Annelle, I whispered. He paused. No, Julietta. Thank yourself. You chose to fight. You chose to live. If you've ever been scared to set boundaries because you thought you'd lose love, subscribe now. The truth is, the love you lose when you set boundaries was never real love to begin with. News spread quickly. Neighbors whispered. Rebecca had lost the house her mother gave her. She moved the family into a cramped apartment across town. The twins shared a room. David took a factory job. Rebecca was forced to return to work. For the first time, their comfort was gone. And for the first time, Rebecca was living without me. Meanwhile, my days in Switzerland blossomed. I joined a hiking group for seniors. We walked mountain trails, laughing, sharing stories. For once, my stories weren't about Rebecca. They were about me. I took a watercolor class, my brush gliding across paper in colors I hadn't touched in decades. I discovered a small bookstore cafe where I sipped lattes and read novels just for pleasure. Each heartbeat felt lighter, each breath steadier. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. You know what's strange? I didn't feel joy at Rebecca's suffering. I felt relief that justice had finally balanced the scales. For years, I had been the pulse keeping her life steady. Now, for the first time, I found my own. But Rebecca wasn't finished. The more she lost, the more desperate she became. And her next attempt to drag me back into her life would cross a line I never thought a daughter could cross. For years, every letter, every call, every text from my daughter began with a need. But then, one day I opened an envelope and found words that asked for nothing but love. It started with an email from an address I recognized instantly. David's, my son-in-law. The subject line was simple. I'm sorry. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Julietta, he wrote, I saw your interview. I watched you speak about your sacrifices, about what Rebecca said to you. And I need to tell you something I should have said long ago. You're right. What Rebecca told you was unforgivable. I've watched her manipulate you for years, and I didn't stop her because I was benefiting too. I let you pay our bills, babysit our children, bail us out. I was silent, and in that silence, I became guilty. Tears blurred my vision. He continued, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know the kids miss you. They don't understand why you're gone. Rebecca told them you're sick, but I think they deserve the truth when they're older. I just hope it's not too late for me to say this. I'm sorry. I closed my laptop slowly. His words didn't erase the years. They didn't excuse the silence. But they were a crack of honesty in a wall that had been built too high.
If someone admitted they had stood by while you were mistreated, would you forgive them or never speak to them again? Comment forgive or never. A month later, I received an envelope with handwriting that made my heart skip. Childlike, uneven letters. Inside, 2 pieces of paper covered in colorful drawings. Stick figures, mountains, a woman with gray hair and a bright smile. And then their words. Dear Grandma Julieta, Dad told us the truth. He told us Mom said something very ugly to you, and that's why you left. We want you to know we miss you. We understand now. We are proud of you for being brave. When we are older, can we visit you in Switzerland? We love you, Grandma. Your grandchildren. I pressed the letter to my chest. For years, my presence had been expected but never valued. My money had been needed, my time consumed. But here, in these innocent words, was the first pure sign of love in a long time, love that asked for nothing but my existence. That night, I sat at my desk, pen in hand. My dearest grandchildren, I wrote, your words are the most beautiful gift I have received in years. I love you deeply, no matter the distance. One day, when you are old enough to make your own choices, the doors to my home and my heart will always be open to you. Until then, remember this. Words have power. They can build or they can destroy. Choose them carefully. And never forget, respect is the truest form of love. I sealed the letter, a single tear falling onto the envelope. For once, it wasn't a tear of sorrow. If you've ever been moved by words from a child, words that felt purer than anything from an adult, hit subscribe, because the next part of my journey shows how even broken hearts can inspire healing far beyond family walls. By then, my life in Switzerland had grown richer than I imagined. I joined a watercolor group that met twice a week. I found a book club of women my age who had stories as painful and as liberating as mine. Every time I laughed with them, every time I hiked a trail or painted a flower, I thought, I am no longer just a mother. I am Julieta again. From Rebecca, there was silence. Not apologies, not admissions. Only bitterness passed through mutual acquaintances. Complaints about rent, about work, about how I had abandoned her. But I no longer lived in her complaints. I lived in the peace of my own choices. For years, every letter I received was a bill. Every call was a plea. Every text was an emergency. But this letter, from my grandchildren, asked for nothing but me. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer invisible. Months later, another letter arrived, but this one didn't come from my grandchildren. It came from a publisher, and what they asked me changed my story once again.
My daughter asked me to disappear. I granted her wish, but what she never realized is that in losing me, I found myself. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed with the logo of a Swiss publisher. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling with curiosity. Dear Mrs. Johnson, it began, we came across your letter. When a mother's love becomes self-destruction, your story is powerful. We believe it could help countless others. Would you consider writing a book with us? For a moment, I sat frozen. Me? An author? I had spent my life writing checks. Now I was being asked to write words that mattered. I whispered aloud, yes, 1,000 times yes. For the next 3 months, I poured my soul onto paper. I recounted the sacrifices, the betrayals, the midnight tears. But I also wrote about the healing, the tulips by the lake, the silk scarf, the laughter with strangers who became friends. I titled it,
When Love Hurts, Freeing Yourself from Family Chains After 70. The publisher released it. To my astonishment, it became a bestseller in Switzerland and spread across Europe. Letters poured in from women around the world. Your story gave me courage to set boundaries with my son. I realized I'm not a bad mother for saying no. I finally understand that love without respect is not love. Each message reminded me, my pain had birthed purpose. Would you read a book if it could save you decades of silent suffering? Tell me in the comments, yes or no. By 75, my calendar was full, not with obligations, but with joys. Mondays, watercolor class. Wednesdays, hiking with friends. Fridays, cafe meetups with my book club. Sundays, quiet mornings on the balcony, looking at the Alps. I wasn't waiting by the phone anymore. I wasn't a lifeline. I was a life. Sometimes I caught myself smiling for no reason, just because the air felt fresh, or the light hit the mountains just right. From Rebecca, I heard almost nothing. Rumors reached me that she had moved again, that David worked long hours, that the twins were growing fast. But the silence was no longer painful. It was peaceful. Because I finally understood that some silences are not losses. They are gifts. On my 75th birthday, a package arrived. Inside was a hand-drawn card from the twins. "Happy birthday, Grandma," it said in colorful letters. Inside, they had drawn me standing on a mountain, arms wide, smiling. No money, no requests, just love. I wept. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. If you believe boundaries can be the greatest gift you give yourself, subscribe now, because this story may end here, but the lesson is one we all need to carry. Sitting on my balcony that night, champagne in hand, I thought about the woman I used to be. The Julieta who worked double shifts, who sold her mother's jewelry, who signed away $500,000 believing it bought love. That Julieta had died on Rebecca's 45th birthday, and in her place a new woman was born, one who finally understood that love without respect is exploitation and that dignity is priceless. My daughter asked me to disappear. I granted her wish. But what she never realized is that in losing me, I found myself. The gift I kept was myself. And at 75, I can finally say, that is enough. To you listening right now, maybe you're a parent who's given until it hurt. Maybe you're a child who never realized the cost of what was given. Learn from my story. Don't wait until words cut so deep that they leave scars no apology can heal. Respect the ones who love you. Value the ones who stand by you. And if you're the giver, don't forget you are also worthy of keeping something for yourself. Tell me, what do you think the greatest gift in life is? I'll be in the comments tonight reading your answers. And if my story touched you, subscribe so you don't miss the next true story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. It might just save them years of pain.